Hey boys and girls, it's Vladimir here. Alright, so Gamescom 2023 dropped the teaser trailer for Diablo 4 Season 2. There's been a lot of feedback around it. Not all of it good, and some of it good, but not all of it good. Either way, before we get into that, do me a favor. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification button so you never miss a video. Alright, so we got Chris Wilson and Rod Fergusson here. They did an interview with it, and I've yet to see it, so we're trying a new format today. I'm gonna watch this with you guys, and I'll react to it and put in any comments I have with it as we go along. Sharing in the comment section below, and let me know what you guys think as well. Here we go.
I'm Chris Wilson, production director over the live service for Diablo 4.
And I'm Rod Fergusson, general manager of all things Diablo.
So season 2 is going to be launching on October 17th, and it's called The Season of Blood. We're really excited because this is going to be a new vampire threat is essentially invading Sanctuary. And so there's going to be a new quest line, so the player will be partnering with the new character named Eris, who's being...
Okay, one thing I want to point out right now, for Season 2, guys, if you haven't noticed already with the characters that you're seeing on the screen for the gameplay here, these are just reskinned characters. They're not new characters. They're not new stuff. They're just reskinned. The one on the previous screen, I believe just a moment ago, that was a remnant.
Player will be partnering with the new character
right there. This guy right here, that's just a remnant.
Named Eris, who's being voiced by Gemma Chan. So we're super excited to have her join our really, great ensemble of voice talent. And she thinks she's gonna be a great fit for the game. And on top of that, the character is gonna gain access to new vampiric powers that you'll be able to use across all of the different classes to take out the new vampire threat that's invaded Sanctuary.
All right, new vampiric powers. This better not be another thing we gotta sit in our bags. That's all I've got to say to that.
We'll have new legendary items and weapons, new uniques. And it's really going to provide a whole new way to kind of like progress with your character and a new power fantasy.
Yeah, and then that's sort of the theme and story side of it. And then obviously with each season, as part of a live service, we want to do quality of life and make changes to the game sort of in the end game as well. And so one example of that is in Season 2, we're introducing 5 new additional bosses. Because we look at, what is the progress you make from level, say, 50 to 100. And we want...
He just lied. He said 5 new additional bosses. When in fact, actually, it is 5 new and returning bosses. So this means there are some bosses that are reskinned. This guy is recently, Rod Fergusson, has recently made some comments that have pissed quite a few people off with regards to managing expectations. I didn't do a video on it. That's a different story for a different day.
Want to have more milestones along the way where you can be like, oh, I can test my build against these certain types of bosses. And we also know there's a huge desire for our uniques and the uber uniques because they have a very low drop rate and sometimes they really solidify your build. And so now with these 5 new bosses, you can actually target uniques and you can go and have a much higher drop rate on an uber unique than you would in the open world.
Those 5 bosses, obviously it's interesting because the way people approach this kind of stuff now is they're very invested. So like at the same time as being excited, there's a level of cynicism towards everything that is coming out. So I saw the 5 bosses, excitement, and then immediately people were like, are they just going to be reskins of a boss that we know 5 times? So can you talk about like what those 5 bosses will actually entail?
It's a mixture of sort of like new and sort of, one of the things we heard a lot from players.
Boom, right there. Just fucking busted lying right there on the spot.
Was like, I don't think we've ever even talked much about it, where the bosses are coming from, but there's a notion of like, I play these campaigns.
Okay, hold on. He just said he doesn't know where the bosses are coming from. That is total bullshit. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt the video, guys, but I gotta share this. Okay, right here. Okay, guys, just for everybody to check this shit out. Right here, 5 endgame bosses, new and returning foes for additional endgame challenges. Oh, God, you idiot.
Bosses, and I didn't necessarily get to fight them ever again unless I'm playing the campaign. So that's part of the inspiration. So there's going to be definitely like ways we can leverage content we've had, but also new content as well. The fact that we're doing it in the seasonal and the eternal is going to be really exciting. And again, that idea of like, we've heard a lot of feedback around the Uber unique. So, and what's really interesting is that actually it's a boss ladder. So it's not like in Diablo 2 where you would just go and farm a boss over and over and over and over again. There's actually sort of prerequisites to be able to summon a boss that you'll have to go through the bosses to get there. And so it's actually has its own gameplay involved in even having a boss appear.
What happens when something goes out into the world? When do you start to pick up on the general sentiment from the audience? What is it, data points? Is it social media? How do you know what the sentiment is?
So with live service development, I mean, we're always paying attention to the community. So we're looking at all sources of feedback. We solicit surveys to some of our players. So we use that as one kind of funnel for information. We look at telemetry and data that's like coming back from like, the back ends. So we kind of see like where there are pain points or friction from just looking at data. But then also we're paying attention to, forums. When we do a blog post or release patch notes, we're trying to look at like, what is the response, what are things that are coming back from the community, and we use that to kind of help inform some of the, decision points for the future. And so what's great with the live service is like between seasons, patches, hot fixes, there's numerous kind of vehicles for us to kind of like inject change and evolve the game for the future. And it's always in pursuit of making the best possible experience for the players.
It's one of the big challenges is really around the idea of the vocal minority. Like sometimes a very small group can be very loud, and that's why we use things like surveys. Like, because you're always managing sort of the qualitative information you get, where people's just opinions, and then the quantitative information you have, which is the actual data that shows what's actually happening. And it's in a game where it's sort of built on a power fantasy. Like, everybody loves candy, right? And so but you can't have candy all the time. And so that's one of the hard parts about managing, is that sometimes there's a little bit of medicine and you need some sugar to go with it, right? And so as we're looking at our feedback and we're looking at what
a second, did he really just say that? That sometimes there's a little bit of medicine and you need some sugar to go with it? What is this, fucking Mary Poppins? All right, first off, oh my God. What you guys have done is not medicine. That it's been pure laziness. What they did, they've had 15 years to learn. How many Diablo games? There's 5 Diablo games, if you count Immortal, right? Yet you made the same mistakes that you've learned from over the years, repeatedly.
We need to do to balance the world, because we want every build to be playable and we want every build to be viable. And so sometimes you have.
Then why aren't they? And why weren't these put into the game originally? You want all these builds to be viable and playable. Yet we can't just change into these builds, for one. 2, why aren't they playable? Like, every build cannot take out Uber Lilith. 100%. Every build cannot take out Uber Lilith. So that is not a viable build.
You have to sort of manage that across all the different classes and all the different builds, and sometimes you need a little medicine. And I think one of the things as we look at Season 1, we want to really show that we're being responsive and reactive and being agile, but we sort of got 2/3 of the way there, and we had a lot of the medicine, but we didn't have the sugar yet. And so, but to be able to act quickly, we sort of said, well, that's good. We've got.
Okay, so he made this comment in his interview, the 2/3 of the way there, basically stating that, yeah, we're releasing stuff 2/3 finished. Is basically what they said. Basically, from what he just said out of his own mouth, is we gave you nothing but shit, and we didn't give you anything fun. 2/3 medicine, no sugar. Like, seriously, come on.
The fix, but when we didn't bring and here's the other fun part that makes that balance work. And so I think that's part of the criticism of Season 1, is that we did the medicine, didn't quite yet do the sugar, and then we've been doing the sugar as we go now. And it was something our game director talked about in one of the live streams, is that moving forward, anytime we have to do any sort of significant balance, we'll always have that other side of it, like, because it's really about, we're making the game for player joy. We're making the game the best game we can for players, and so. But sometimes they have to have a salad. They can't have ice cream for dinner every night, and so you just have to kind of balance your messaging, manage expectations, communicate more openly, and I think we're.
Okay, this guy should not be in his position. And in fact, actually, I believe he's been in several positions where he's had some very questionable games. And I believe there's some issues with Diablo 3 where he had to take a leave of absence or go make Bobby's coffee. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he's not the right person for this job.
We're doing that now as we go into season 2.
You mentioned it earlier, but how do you account for the vocal minority in a way?
Sorry, we missed something there just briefly.
For the vocal minority,
communicate more openly, and I think we're doing that now as we go into season 2.
Okay. They're doing it now going into season 2. That's what, 4 months, 5 months too late? You should have done this on release. This should have been done before release. Quality control would have assured that. Quality assurance would have assured that. Proper beta testing would have assured that. Proper due diligence would have assured that.
You mentioned it earlier, but how do you account for the vocal minority in a way that feels like you're speaking to them, but also not balancing that with the realistic kind of achievements that you can do? Because it's obviously like Diablo 4 comes out, everyone's super positive and everyone is like really up on it, and the vast majority of people are enjoying it. But then the conversation quickly turns into like, this is missing, that is missing. But that conversation is very much defined and pushed by a group of people that are at level 100 or 80, and they're the only people that are like really vocal.
Right.
So it can seem like when people are looking at it, oh, this is a really pervasive issue, and it's actually just a small group of people. How do you like approach that, and is there anything that you do to try and tell the...
You know what? It is kind of sad, and I will actually kind of agree with that statement. It is a small group of people, but the sad part is that it's a small group of people because it was such a chore and such a pain in the ass to get to level 80 to 100. So those are the only ones that really got to experience the end game. Anybody that's actually got there. Anybody who's just sitting there playing the campaign, yeah, you're having a blast. You're having a great time. You're not gaining much. I'm sorry, but you're not. Until you get to the end game where you're actually trying to max that power, min-max, and actually get into it, you're not seeing what the real problems of the game are. The campaign was great. The first 40, 50 levels, fantastic. The issue is in the 70 to 100 range is what I'm going to say. And yeah, you know what? Maybe the small minority, but that's because that's where the real gamers went to. You know, they push... The ones that really spent that time trying to get to that point.
Your own team, like, hey, I know it looks like this, but we have to think about everyone, and how do you message that out as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the quantitative data really helps there, so you can actually see what's happening with the game, and you can go like, oh, you know, this might be an issue for people who are level 100, and this is the percentage of people who have actually gotten there so far, and we can sort of look at how big of an issue that actually is.
I wonder what actual percentage is.
I don't want to say vocal minority to be dismissive, because sometimes that vocal minority are also your influencers and the people who are, you know, the tastemakers who will be like, hey, this is how we feel about it, and you want to take that in as well. And that's why it's always is a balance between knowing what are we hearing and what are we seeing in the game and what are we feeling when we play. And I think that notion of like, hey, you know, one of the things we were excited about with D4 is that as a mainline game, no other Diablo game actually had any end game at all. Like when the campaign rolled credits, you were done. And so we were really happy with D4 to have Helltide and Nightmare Dungeons and the Tree of Whispers and PvP. And so we felt like...
Okay, PvP, you stated you wouldn't balance. So you guys said you would not be focusing on PvP. Helltide's actually kind of cool. It's way too far apart. That's my opinion. There could be more done with it too. It could be more chaotic. I'd like to see more chaos, personally. Tree Whispers, you've already had that. You had that in Bounties. Okay? And then Nightmare Dungeons is just riffs. You've had all of this. You did nothing new except for Helltide.
This was a great starting place. And so when we talked, even if you go back to our interviews pre-launch, we would talk about this is the beginning and not the ending of Diablo. You know, this is a foundation we're building upon. And you're seeing that, like in season 2 with these 5 additional bosses, in season 3 we're going to be bringing in leaderboards. Like this is an evolution of a game over time. And so the notion that you can kind of grind your way to 100 and go like, what the heck, where's everything I was expecting? Like all that stuff is being layered in over time as we go, and we're continuing to make the game, you know, better and better. So it really is just sort of like, definitely take in what you hear, but also, you know, trust but verify, go and see what the data is telling you as well.
In addition to that, I think the other important piece of this is transparency, right? So we're really trying to create and be open with our community about setting expectations. Like, here's what we're trying to do in the near future, releasing patch notes early, really just, having live streams, the campfire chats, letting our audience know, like, here's what we're trying to do in the short term. Here are things we want to even do in the medium term, like he mentioned leaderboards for season 3. Like, we're trying to just be more open about that information versus like holding everything to the vest.
And Joe in our last, he talked about philosophy. Like, here's why we're doing certain things. Because I think it's one thing to say what you're doing, another thing to say why you're doing it. And so I think helping people understand, like, oh, this is our goal, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and just give some background to why these decisions are being made.
You guys have been quite candid with, the patch came out and it nerfed some stuff, and you're like, okay, we did it wrong, we won't do that again.
Yeah.
And then you talk about all the vehicles you have to kind of approach it. How do you feel about the expectation that creates? Because it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Where you're like, oh, we can react, but then the expectation from the audience is when they demand something, they need it immediately. And they're like, why don't you put it? How do you guys as developers feel about that, and how do you try and manage those expectations?
It is a balancing act, depending on what it is we're trying to address. I mean, it can obviously take development time to get it right? You don't want to be too hasty to just rush, change, because you may end up imbalancing the game in a different way that you maybe didn't foresee. So you have to take your time to really think through, okay, how do we want to address the problem that's been flagged? Look at it in terms of priority as well. There's oftentimes competing priorities, so it's like making sure you're targeting the thing that's going to have the biggest impact for the player first and foremost. And then
I'm going to say that is actually a good answer. That is a smart answer. The problem is for the game is they didn't take the time to do that. That is the problem. Is they rushed the game out. Diablo 4 was not ready to be released.
Finding the right time to release those things. And so it's just really a balancing act that our leadership and our designers have to really kind of work through for each issue as it comes through.
Yeah, it's also complexity of the development process. When we look at, we have essentially 3 teams working on the seasonal side. We have our odd teams, so doing season 1, then season 3, then season 5. We have our even teams doing season 2, season 4, and then we have another team that's focused on what's going on in the live game. And so on top of those 3 teams, who are the odds and evens are leapfrogging each other. We've got our live team, and then we actually have an expansion team working as well. And so when we hear a piece of feedback, there's always a conversation. If we agree with it, then it's like, is this a short term? Hey, we can do that as a hot fix overnight. Is this more of a patch that has to come in 2 weeks? Or actually it's something we're going to address next season because of the way that, we're a lot of the ways, that's part of the thing. When we put out season 1 was finished when we released. And so there was no real player feedback yet.
There was also no real season 1. 30-minute campaign for season 1, the quest line, and a couple of gems and a boss, and reskinned mobs all over the place. There was no season 1. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry, but the items for season 1 are garbage. Yeah.
Other than sort of the beta feedback, but after launch, season 1 was kind of done, and so that's why we use that pre-season time to tweak as much as we could, and why we remove the need for the altars of Lilith and that kind of thing. So it's just that notion that the trains are always running, right? The trains are always leaving the station, and what can get on at which train is always part of the balancing act of oh yeah, we agree with that feedback. Now which train can we actually make it on, and are we willing to delay other things to make that happen? Because I think sometimes people just feel like it's always additive, and really it's kind of there's only so much scope that a team can do. And so to say oh, this new idea wants to come in, well then that means usually another idea needs to get postponed. And so when we're talking about the prioritization, it's oh, we want to do this, are we willing to slow down this other thing? And so that's definitely one of the things, the give and takes you have to do when you're balancing.
I don't want to say misunderstanding, but a lot of the kind of discussion is also attributed to things like the battle pass system and the season model as well. And some people say it doesn't feel like it works in Diablo, and we've had other people who make games similarly, like the Path of Exile team, looking at it and being we're learning a lot from the viability of something like a battle pass model. How often do you kind of reassess that, and do you think it does still work in this day and age, especially because it's a lot of cosmetic stuff and you don't want to upset the balance, and when it is you can't put a lot of meaningfully changing content in there, is it even worth doing? How do you approach looking at that kind of system?
I think that's what we're learning now. Like, that's one of the things is like we're having lots of conversation about the first time we've done something, and so in times we'll come together and we'll go like, hey, everybody, this is one data point, and we're looking at season 1 and like, what's the battle pass doing?
They're having a lot of conversations about the first time they're doing something. This Diablo 4, right? 4, not 1, 2, 3. Immortal. This is Diablo 4. I haven't seen a lot of firsts in this game aside from Battle Pass.
What's the shop doing? What is the seasonal reset doing? How do we feel about it? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's one data point. And so I'm really excited for season 2 on October 17th, because that's now we'll have 2 data points to go like, okay, how many people are playing? How many people are engaging with Battle Pass and shop? How's it all working? And so I think this is all learning for us. Like, I know people tend to think like, oh, you had 10 years with Diablo 3, you must know everything. And the answer is very different games, very different team. And so and obviously the industry has changed in the last 10 years. So for us, it's really, this is a lot of learning.
So very different team, yeah. Diablo 3 has a team that learned the lessons. You guys took none of that experience and put it into Diablo 4. Gotcha.
For us, so we're going to, make some mistakes as we're trying to make the game better and better.
Yeah. Do you think there's kind of like a different expectation on a team like the Diablo team, or even a developer like Blizzard? Yeah, because obviously you're seen as one of the biggest developers in the world, but the thing that you're introducing is still quite new to you. Or there's the expectation, well, this is Blizzard. They shouldn't be allowed to stumble or able to stumble. They should know this stuff. Like, how do you kind of like approach that sentiment, knowing that there's no like pushing back against it?
Especially for,
I mean,
okay, sorry.
I think it's
especially, so I'm in Canada, guys. My game cost me $145 after taxes. Okay, it's about $100 in US or something like that, approximately. Shortly after, that is a hell of a lot of money for all of the stumbling they did and they've done, and they don't see why that's upsetting to people.
It's just like we're all kind of just working our way through it. It's like sure, we have a lot of benefits of being part of Blizzard, and we had a lot of learnings, and we were able to talk to each other and understand what's going on in WoW and what's going on in Overwatch, and we can talk to each other. But at the end of the day, this team is like doing a live service like this is new for this team. And even we have some D3 veterans and things, but a lot of our team, like there's a good part of our team where
live service is new to Diablo. Yes. Is it new to Blizzard? Would anybody like to comment on this, please? So is Diablo's new live service? Yes, but what is World of Warcraft? Is that not live service? What about Overwatch? Is that not live service? What about Activision with Call of Duty? And they're, oh my God.
Diablo 4, we were at the launch party where I was like, how many people, this is your first game ever? And like a bunch of hands go up and you're like, this is the very first game they've ever shipped is Diablo 4.
There we go. That is the fucking problem right there. Let's replay that.
We were at the launch party where I was like, how many people, this is your first game ever? And like a bunch of hands go up and you're like, this is the very first game they've ever shipped is Diablo 4. And so
you would think for a game such as this, okay, I'm not saying don't bring in new blood, but I'm thinking they overly flooded it. And a lot of it probably has to do with there is a huge demand for developers in the market right now. Blizzard hasn't had the best work environment for the last little while. And my guess is they were also trying to keep costs down. And by bringing in new blood, they don't have to pay as much. I'm thinking this is a large part of the new issues, aside from the time crunches.
So there's definitely like the combination of experience and the ability to access Blizzard, but like we're still going to learn as we go. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I get the, hey, you're Blizzard, you should never make a mistake. But at the same time, like,
no,
again, the industry is always changing the game.
You can make a mistake. There's making a mistake. What you guys have done is completely fumbled the ball. You learn from the mistakes you make. But what you did was you didn't learn from any of the mistakes you guys made in the previous 4 games in the franchise. That is the problem.
Games are always changing, the players are always changing, so it's just going to be learning as we go, and that's why what I love about a live service is we can evolve over time. It's not a fixed state, and so that with each season, and we're going to support the game for years to come, is that we can evolve and learn as we go.
I think what's fascinating about that is because we have a studio like you guys where you very much are like figuring it out as you go along to a degree, and it's kind of like the expectation is, why are you doing this? You should have the perfect product each time, and it's kind of, it's not thought of as great. But then on the flip side, you have a...
You know what? Okay, so for those of you out there who remember Blizzard of old and Blizzard North, okay, I built my first computer literally just to play Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness and StarCraft 1. Those games were gods among the video game market. Then you got into Warcraft 3 and then World of Warcraft, okay? What the difference was then is they really cared about the games. They really played the games. They put their heart and souls into those games. And it wasn't about the bottom dollar. That's what made them so great. Is they really cared and they saw and they took the time to make sure they were perfect. How many times did they scrap StarCraft Ghost because it wasn't ready?
Between like Larian, which just put out one of the best RPGs in a long time, but it was developed over 3 years of iterating, very publicly forward-facing, and people are celebrating that right now. It must be kind of wild to be in an industry where you can have two contradicting kind of like narratives on the same thing going, and like how do you deal with it on a day-to-day basis as developers?
They all have that. I mean, I'm just really happy that this feels like the year of the RPG, you know, and you know, like a Starfield and Final Fantasy and Hogwarts, like and all the stuff that's going on. So I'm just excited to be part of that, and I think they each have their own place when you think about like the turn-based versus the hack and slash versus, you know, the third person versus isometric. Like I think it's really cool that the RPGs can have such a diversity, and so I don't know. I just think it's great that RPGs is really coming to the top this year.
I will actually agree with that statement. It is great to see RPGs coming back up. They were getting kind of stagnant for a while. So yeah, that was the interview. Yeah, I made most of my comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think, though. Like, please leave a comment with what you thought was the most interesting point in this, and let me know what you think. Just going through some of the comments here. Let's have a look here. Let's see what other people have to say. Great questions in the interview. Wild that Blizzard is talking about learning and how to make a Diablo 4 game when there's a Diablo 4, when there's a 4 on the box. I agreed. The learning, here we go. Yeah, I should start adding in sets. Okay, here's a comment. They're making some good points, but still, after 10 years of Diablo 3, must have known stash space would be an issue. People would want loadouts, all them sort of quality of life of things. The idea that this is a new development team should not stand, because those senior devs definitely knew what D3 made it good. Exactly. What do you say to the people who say the new bosses are just reskins of the old ones? All right, let's see. Well, you see, we made the super rare drops, medicine and sugar, and uber rare drops, microtransactions, and medicine. And they're basically just reskins of old bosses. Yeah, exactly. So, you know what, guys? I'm going to let you guys go through. I'm going to read some more of these myself. I'm going to leave the link to this down below so you guys can check this shit out yourself. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, please pick out a part in the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And yeah, thanks for watching. It's Vladimir. And if you like the video, again, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification button. And we'll catch you again next time. Keep gaming, guys.